trash, you the maid, so you back. I'm a savage, yeah. Classy, bougie, ratchet, yeah. Sassy, moody, nasty, yeah. Acting stupid, what's happening? Bitch, what was happening? Bitch, I'm a savage, yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel and thank you so very much for tuning in. I want to welcome you all for my first installment to Murder Meals, where I'm going to be talking about true crime stories while actually cooking real life dinner for me and my family. I have always been very into true crime and I actually love to cook. So for today's meal, I am going to be making baked turkey wings with a side of greens, macaroni and cheese, and corn muffins. So for today's case, y'all, is literally wild. Now I must give you a heads up that this is more than likely going to be a two-part case just because it is just so complex on so many different levels. It's just, be prepared to be shook to the core because your girl was, yeah. So today's case is going to be about a married couple. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and get the cooking and get to telling you this good old story. So this story actually does take place in Houston, Texas. This is going to be about John Hill and his wife, Joan Robinson Hill. Now, let's talk about Miss Robinson first, which is her maiden name. She was actually the daughter of Davis Robinson. He was actually born February 12th, 1998 in Louisiana. And he had a wife, her name was, and I may be pronouncing this wrong because your girl be messing up names, but her name is Rhea Robinson. And she was actually born November 29th, 1989 in Louisiana. Now, David Ashton, which I'm going to be calling him Ash for the purposes of this story. So Ash, he actually studied dentistry in college in New Orleans, but he really didn't care for it. He just didn't really have a passion for it. So he told his parents, say, this ain't it, I'm gone, I'm doing something else. So at that point, he actually pursued a multitude of careers, and it worked out pretty well for him. Now, he had some misfortunes, but he also acquired a lot of wealth. So it's kind of like an up and down, but eventually he actually did strike it big in the oil fields, well, in the oil businesses. He was a big oil tycoon. And don't get me to line about how all that works. That's just what they had told me. So we're gonna go with that. But so he was this big oil tycoon. He was described as being a very strong alpha male, can come off as very abrasive and aggressive. He was one of those guys that you really just don't mess with. He gets what he wants. When he wants it, you don't really tell him no. So basically he was that boy, you know. So after getting started and, just settling down on that, him and his wife actually moved to Houston, Texas. Now, shortly after moving, they did unfortunately find out that she was not able to have any children. So at that point, they did go to a local orphanage, and that's where they actually had met baby Joan. And just off of, first sight, they fell in love with her instantly. Now, Joan Robinson Hill, she was actually born February 6, 1932. So I'm just waving this thing around. Child, I'm not trying to go to nobody's emergency room. But anyways, she was an Aquarius. She was born in Houston, Texas. She was placed up for adoption by her mother. She was unmarried. Not much information was given about her biological mother. Honestly, I just assumed basically that she was just a young mother who was unmarried. And back then, that wasn't the play. You was either married, about to get married, or I guess you went off to those schools for the girls who got themselves in a little trouble. But either way, she was placed up for adoption. So I think at this point, honestly, Joan was only 1 month old when the Robinsons came to the orphan and just fell in love with her. So at that point, she was adopted by the Robinsons, and baby, you couldn't tell them anything. Joan was raised very well. She was doted on by her parents. She was definitely a daddy's girl. People say when it came to Joan and her daddy, nothing was breaking them up. He spoiled his daughter. She was literally just everything to him. She didn't go without. She always had what she needed, and her parents, they just treated her very well. You know, she was given the best things in life. Now, she was immediately drawn to horseback riding. She started riding as early as 3 years old. And she actually fell in love with her horse named Dottie. And at the age of 5, she actually won 3rd place in the equestrian competition. So that was a big deal. So after that, it was just her and Dottie. They was up in that thing. My girl was equestrian around this, just equestrian it up. I love riding horses too. Now, I'm not riding equestrian because I heard, you know, that there definitely is a lot of money and upkeep for them horses, but obviously they had it like that. She does not. So other than that little horse at the Kroger's where you put the little quarter in and you get the going, she wasn't doing much horseback riding unless she was at summer camp, but that's, you know, another story for another day. But she actually went on to win a lot of competition. She was very gifted in this area when it came to her equestrian, you know, being an equestrian, just horseback riding in general. I don't know if it's being an equestrian, but you know, I get it. Joan actually attended school at Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri. She was said to be an average student, but she had a great social life. Like, Joan was very beautiful. She was graceful. She was raised by a strong man, so she knew how to hold her own in conversations. And she was just naturally, you know, some people are just naturally like the center of the attention when they walk in the room. They just naturally attract. That was said to be Joan. She was just very much that girl. But, you know, now, again, baby Ashton, played by his daughter, he was very, very overprotective of his daughter. And when it came to what she did in her life, he played a heavy role in it. And he had his hands in a lot of the things that, you know, she was doing or not doing. Her father actually, when she went to college, her dad, and y'all listen to this. Her dad leased a suite of hotel rooms close to the campus so him and his wife could go and stay there periodically. When I say periodically, they'd be there weeks on end and then return home. And there's a cat in my backyard. But they would return home and they would, just so they could be close to their daughter. Who's doing that? But whatever. So they wanted to be close to her, and the wife stayed majority of the time, but Ash would come and go. Obviously, he had business matters to take care of. Now, she was in college. Joan actually did start acting, and she actually really loved it. She liked the thrill and just everything that she got from acting, and she was said to be actually pretty decent. And again, she was a beautiful girl. So she was actually approached by a talent scout to do a screen read for, I'm assuming a show, I don't know. But she was to do a screen read, and she was very excited about this. She wanted to go out there, she wanted to do it. But baby, Daddy Ash, he wasn't having it. He quickly shut that down and told her no, and that it just wasn't happening. He was under the impression that she was too, he didn't want to get taken advantage of. Let's just say that. He thought there was predators out there and it just wasn't safe for his baby girl. So he told her no. But she still did make her own choices about a lot of things. Miss Jones, she actually was married two times before she actually met her husband and married the husband that's going to be in this case. Her first marriage was to a spike bitten. He actually had a promising career as a Navy pilot, but that didn't last long. And then her second husband, and I'm pretty sure my girl thought this was it, because her second husband was actually to a family friend, well, childhood friend, I should say. His name was Cecil Burgess. It don't matter because that didn't last either. He was a lawyer in New Orleans. They got divorced shortly after. They said that both of the marriage lasted a little over 5 years. So take with that as you may. We don't know who the issue was. Was it Joan? Don't know, but my girl was the common denominator. Now, her third and last marriage obviously was to Mr. John Hill. She actually got married on September 28th. You know, that's my birthday month, Virgo season. I mean, but technically I guess that'd be Libra season, but either way, September Virgos. In 1957. So let's get into that boy, John, because he is a whole character out here in these streets. So John Hill, he was born February 3rd, 1931. Again, an Aquarius. He was born in Texas, so he was a native to Texas. So, I mean, I guess that's good. He was actually the second of 3 children. He was born to a farmer, Robert Reynold Hill, and his wife, Myra Hannah Hill. Again, there wasn't much information in regards to his parents, so I don't know. But all three of the Hill children, they actually took piano lessons. The mom had the mentality of you're going to be some type of musically versed. She wanted some type of extracurriculum. She just felt like you had a better chance in life for whatever reason if you had some type of musical enrichment background or something of that sort. But you know, I get that. I do. As a mother, I do get that. Now, John and his brother Julian, they actually became very gifted musicians. They were very, very good. Like, John fell in love with piano and honestly everything music. And apparently his brother was very gifted as well. I don't know about the third one. I don't even know his name, but I guess he wasn't good. Look. I don't know. You know how when you a kid and you take piano lessons, you just be over there, well, not piano lessons, but you see piano, you just be over there pounding on that thing and you swear you sound good. I just imagine that's how he was, because it's like there's no mention of him or what he did, or did he transition over? Who knows? But either way, yeah. Now, John actually was very smart and a gifted kid. He did very well in school. He made good grades, and he actually later went on to study in the liberal arts at Abilene Christian College, where he graduated summa cum laude. I think I pronounced that right. I don't know how to pronounce it because I was nowhere near close to graduating that, but you know. So if you don't know what summa cum laude is, and to be honest, I didn't. I had to look it up. Let me read you what it says. It says, the student who has achieved summa cum laude has achieved the highest dictation. This student has earned grades within the highest percentage of their school or department, or has achieved some other metric that the school considers worthy of the highest recognition. So he was smart and gifted, like I said, basically. He attended the Baylor College School of Medicine. After graduating, he took a residency in surgery at Houston. Now, back then in the 1950s, I guess, you know, cardiac surgeons, that field was actually starting to get very popular and booming. And John quickly realized that, hey, this is going to be, you know, oversaturated, overpopulated. So his mindset behind that was, well, if he wants to stand out from the crowd and that boy wants to make some money, we need to go ahead and dip on over to another specialty. So where's the money at? We all know, still to this day, it was in plastic surgery. So John actually transitioned over to plastic surgery in order to get his degree, to finish his residency program in that. Now, keep in mind, at this point, John had met Joan, and again, they did get married. So at this point, they were actually married. So since he was, you know, doing his residency program, Ash, he's not gonna let his daughter be out here struggling in these streets. He actually told John and Joan that, hey, while John is finishing his residency program, I'll take care of y'all. I got the bills, I got the house, I got X, Y, and Z. So Joan's lifestyle was not about to be interrupted because John's coins were where it needed to be yet. Now, John had always kind of had a little, a little side eye moment to the Robinsons, just simply because more than likely the two butted heads. When you have very strong personalities, and you know, most doctors are typically alpha males or women, you know, that can clash. But at the end of the day, if Ash was writing them checks, you have to sit back and shut up. So, bam, that's exactly what your boy had to do. I always forget to do the onion. Okay, so back to John. Now, at this point, John was actually a residency. However, and when it comes to red flags, my nights are really good, y'all. I'm weak, and I went to the gym this morning, and my body hurt. I don't know why I did that. But John was actually about to lose it all before he could even really start it all. John was about to lose his residency and just get kicked out the whole medical program before he could really just even get up in that thing. So John actually perforated a patient's bowel during a routine operation. Ooh, y'all burn. He actually perforated a patient's bowel after doing a routine operation. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was that after he perforated the valve, John then, at that point, just said, and stitched the patient up. He just went on. He didn't let the patient know or anything that this had happened. He didn't repair anything. He just, you know, went ahead. Now the patient did actually later die because of the severity of just what happened. They actually didn't figure out what obviously had killed him, or that this had happened, until the autopsy was performed. And then what happened? John got a harsh talking to. Yep, he actually just got reprimanded. He got reprimanded, and he actually finished his residency. And John was actually offered a partnership with Nathan Roth. John joined the practice in 1963, and it actually got off to a very great start. You know, they liked each other and all of that. But child, what they say, had the tides quickly change. Y'all don't talk about me how I'm cutting these onions, because I'm not really the best at onion cutting. I normally put it through my chopper, but for the sake of the video, I'm gonna let these folks see me cut these onions. But as y'all see, this is why I typically do not cut my onions. When I say it started good, I meant as far as them liking one another. Because John, being old Johnny boy, he came with the, you know what, and he was just messing up out of the gate, just doing what he wanted to do, just straight out the gate. John had actually failed to tell his patient that a drill bit had actually broken off during a jaw surgery, during a jaw replacement repair, and the drill bit had broken off. I was really thinking how the heck that happened, but I guess it was back in back in 1960, around that time, and it's like, whew, what a time to be alive. Go in there and try to get your jaw fixed, and you're drinking through a straw the rest of your life. Whew, my eyes. Ooh. Ooh. I'm sorry, y'all. It's killing me. One moment. I do apologize. It was hard. I had to take a moment to get that. But anyways, so he didn't tell the patient that the piece had broken off and it was in his jaw, and he just left it there. He didn't try to take it out. He didn't try to tell nobody. He didn't try to run and get help. No, nothing. Who does that? So he was actually confronted by Roth, and whenever he was confronted, it was said that John was apologetic. You know, he was sorry for his mistake and all that extra stuff. But I guess back then they didn't have that database that they have now, to where you got to report these types of things, because at this point this is repeat behavior, that John just be out here doing surgeries and messing up and just not telling nobody. But hey, so again, he was very apologetic, and Dr. Roth, he was sympathetic and, you know, just chalked it up to John being under a great deal of stress, just simply because, you know, that brother that we talked about being so musically gifted, unfortunately, his brother had recently passed away by the S word, and John was going through, you know, a hard time, you know, understandably so. You know, if your brother is no longer here, you know, that'll be hard for anybody. But I guess to me, it doesn't just make up for you just out here messing folks' jaws up. But who am I? So Roth, again, he just kind of chalked it up to where he was, you know, just going through a hard time. So he wanted to give John, you know, the benefit of the doubt. So he just kind of just chalked it up to, you know, I guess that, I won't say growing pains, but, you know, but they said he just unfortunately took that L, you know, at the expense of someone's jaw. I wonder if they got sued. Now, just with that, we can kind of see the direction of this. The partnership quickly went bad. And in 1964, just 4 years after joining, you know, the partnership, it was dissolved. Dr. Roth, he was tired. He was tired of always having to cover for John, people asking him to cover for John and for other surgeons. John was very, very involved at this point with his music, and that was a big priority to him. He wanted to always practice his music. So he was either doing music recitals or just giving music lessons or just practicing or just doing whatever. So the partnership, it dissolved, it was donezo. And now John at this point actually did establish his own practice in the same building. I'd have been like, child, the nerve. Like, I thought I had you up out of here, but you still here. But I mean, I guess you close your door and keep it going. Now, the Hills actually became a regular part of Houston's social life or social scene. But for the most part, they actually led two very separate lives, even though they were a young married couple. And a lot of people thought that was a bit odd, but I guess they didn't too much think about it or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But for the first 6 years of their marriage, they actually lived at Ash Robinson's property. And I just, girl. So the only reason why that they actually even moved was because one of John's friends actually suggested it. Because it's like, sir, you're a grown man, you're a whole surgeon out here. Why are you living in your father-in-law's house? So, I'm laughing because you'll see. So it's like, at that point, I guess he was like, oh, I guess I could go ahead and buy me a house for me and my wife. I am a surgeon, you know, and all that jazz. So Joan actually, she continued to, you know, focus on her equestrian career. She continued to focus on her equestrian career, and John, he was busy growing the practice and honestly focused on his music. Now, on June 14th, 1960, Joan actually gave birth to her first and only son. His name was actually Robert Ashton Hill. Y'all must have forgot Ash was up in that thing because, baby, he quickly came. It said, not happening. We calling you Boot. So he got nicknamed Boot. Don't know where that came from, or if he was trying to do a subtle hint that we need to give your daddy the boot. I don't know, but he quickly nicknamed the child Boot. How you basically rename somebody else's kid? I get that was your grandson, but it's like, Ash, come on now. And here go Joan. She was just sitting back, just saying, well, shoot, might as well. Now, keep in mind that Ash was still footing the bill for a lot of this. He made sure that his daughter had the best of everything. So after this, Ash, he actually bought his daughter a farm. A farm, yes. My boy, he had that money. So, I mean, what's up? So she bought his daughter a farm because she told him that she had ambitions of breeding horses and establishing a riding school. Again, she was very into, you know, the equestrian life and just riding horses. So it makes sense that that would be something that she was interested in and she wanted to do. And then in 1965, the Hills actually bought a house. Now, going back to my giggle from earlier, remember the friend said, oh, you need to move out, blase, blase. And I'm just laughing because, yes, they bought a house, but John actually had to get a loan from his father-in-law in order to buy said house. So really, Joan Daddy bought that house. Now, this address is 1561 Kirby Drive. It's a Southern colonial, there we go. It's a Southern colonial style house. So John, you know, they have this new house and it's not a third, whatever. Now back to, you know, John and some of his habits, well, hobbies, let me call it habit, but he was actually not, you know, again, he was very into music. You know, fun fact, he actually had wanted to be a piano player, but his mom didn't think that was a suitable career. But it actually makes a lot of sense as to the way he cared about as far as his career, his priorities in the sense when it came to like work versus I ain't going to work because I got something to do over here with my music. But anyway, John actually spent about 20 hours a week just strictly doing music, whether it was taking lessons, whether it was giving lessons, doing recitals, or just honestly sitting and listening to music. And I know 20 hours, it may not just sound like that much, but honestly, for a doctor with his own practice, a married doctor with a small child, 20 hours is a lot. It's like, where did you find the time? You know, I be over here thinking about, look, when I was trying to do 20 hours of overtime, you're gonna be tired. It just lets you know that he obviously couldn't be spending a lot of time with his family, because where are you finding those 20? I need to know, because I need to find an extra 20 in my life, because she's out here struggling. So there was actually an old servant room in the house. I know. But this was Texas. But there was actually an old servant room in the house that John actually wanted to convert into a music room. We all got our priorities, honey. But he wants to convert it into a music room. And he actually asked his father-in-law for a loan. Well, should I say another loan, in order to get this done. But child, Ash was done. He said no. He said, no, you still owe me for the loan for this doggone house. What you mean you want to turn a room in here into a music room? No, I'm not doing it, bro. For most people, that'll be it, right? You just be like, okay, I can't do it. You know, it is what it is. Oh, now Johnny boy, my boy went to the bank and got a doggone loan. He took the loan and he actually paid Ash off for what he owed him for the house. And then he applied the rest of it to his music room. Nothing was gonna stop him. At that point, he actually commissioned an engineer in order to put all of this together. And he actually told the engineer, and I quote, "I want the finest music room since the Renaissance Italy." Now, I had to reclaim my counter. Now, John actually estimated that this would cost him $10,000. And now anybody who done renovated something knows that what you think something gonna cost and how much it actually costs is two separate things. As I always find out anytime I go on vacation. Oh yeah, girl, I'm gonna spend only about $200, child. So that was quickly exceeded. By October of when he started there in 1968, John had actually spent $75,000 on this venture. Now, mind you, this is back in 1968, so $75,000 back then is actually the equivalent of today. Let me take a look. $663,814.29. So you was expected to spend $10,000, which back then $10,000 was $88,508 and some change. So obviously he was just cashing it out. And I was just trying to figure out how much was that loan for, because got a dog. Now at this point, having had spent basically over $100,000, the room was almost complete. It was a ballroom sized room. It had double height ceilings. It had crystal chandeliers. It was literally just decked out. The theme was gold, and John actually had a old fireplace taken from a Louisiana plantation home. Clearly you're seeing a theme, but whatever. And he actually had pianos placed at either end of the room. It was just this big ballroom size, just music room. He actually had a built-in theater, which was kind of hidden behind these panels that just concealed it. So it was just like a small version of a man cave, but music wise. So he had that going for him, and he was super excited about it. He didn't care how much money he spent on it. He was just thrilled that he had it done, and you know, he spent all his money on it. Now, Joan, on the other hand, her little business venture, her dream over there at the farm, it wasn't going well. It actually wasn't just doing what she thought. It wasn't performing the numbers that she thought. It wasn't turning a profit. The trainer and the horse, you know, I guess the keeper, upkeep, whatever you want to call them, I'm gonna call it the trainer. The trainer actually had quit due to just butting heads and just not getting on with Ash. And if you know, when there's Joan, Ash is followed, you know, shortly behind. So it just wasn't doing well. And she was obviously, you know, considerably so disappointed and upset with the fact, but she wasn't going to give up. Her dad was actually going to sell it, just close it out and sell it, but she begged him not to, and of course he didn't. She was actually trying to get one of her friends to actually come down and take on the responsibilities of being the trainer and just taking on the actual farm itself in order to help her out. Now by 1968, they had been married at this point for about 11 years, and the marriage, understandably so, was not going too well. One of the big contentions in the marriage, and like just a topic for so many arguments, was obviously John in that doggone music room, because who wouldn't be upset if your husband already, you don't spend time with him, and then at that point he's spending all y'all's money on a doggone music room just so he could ignore you some more at the house. You know, I would obviously have issues with that as well. She was mad about the amount of money that he had poured in the room, but also, Johnny boy started cheating and started actually taking on an extramarital affair, there we go, with a fellow mom named Ann Kurth. He and Ann actually had met at the children's summer camp. She was a divorced mother of 3. She actually had been divorced 3 times. I wonder if it was the kids had the same dad of each one of their dads. I don't know. It didn't say. But that's just me. I'm just thinking. But again, with being in Texas, it's a big state, but it's small at the same time. I don't know if John knew this or not, but Ann actually knew who Joan was. They actually kind of ran in the same social circles. Ann's father was very prominent. I forgot what he was. I think he's an architect. Yeah, he was a prominent architect in that area. So he had a little coinage to himself. So, you know, they kind of went to some of the same prep schools, and they had a lot of the same friends. However, they weren't necessarily friends. Ann had always been jealous of Joan and her beauty, her standing, and how strong she was as a woman. Just, she wanted a lot of the things that Joan had. So obviously, if it comes to now I can get your man, I guess she said, hey, I might as well go, you know. Joan had actually got a reputation, you know, around the camp as just being that mom. You know, that mom that wears too revealing clothing at children functions, always flirting and all of that. Once she met John, she kind of had an interest in him, but once she saw whose man he was, she really had an interest in him at that point. I told you I was going to be using my machine. Make sure I got it on the correct setting. So shortly after meeting, the relationship quickly turned into what it was, a full-blown affair. Now, John, at this point, he was over the whole Robinson family. He was done faking the funk. You know, he wasn't putting on that he liked any of them. Some people even say he didn't even like his own wife. He was just annoyed. He would always make comments about Joan and her appearance, just stating that how he wished that she, you know, looked a certain way, didn't always smell like horses, you know, wish she did her makeup better, just being your typical a-hole, narcissistic, I'm gonna blame you for my wrongdoings husband. You know, and on the other hand, she was, I guess, everything that he was looking for in that aspect. So he made it very clear that, you know, who he wanted. He actually, for a Valentine's Day, he didn't get his wife any type of gift, but yet Baby, he iced his mistress out. He got her a blinged out necklace. He, you know, took her out. He just made her feel special, while on the other hand making his wife, mother of his children, feel like she wasn't anything. But you know, some men like to do that, you know. So one day, Joan was coming home from a equestrian horse show, and when she got home, she actually found a note left from John. This is how trifling he was. Now, granted, I understand that there wasn't cell phones. I don't know if this is on the right amount. It's coming out. Ooh, it's coming out. There was a cell phone back there, but his old trifling dirty tail left her a note, and the note said that he was leaving and things were not good between us. She at that point obviously started calling around trying to figure out what's going on, trying to get more information, just trying to see, you know, what is he talking about. I understand we've been struggling, but dang, you know, you're just gonna leave me while I'm at this show? You can at least wait for me to come home to discuss some things. What's happening? But obviously she was not getting any type of response or answer. He was probably out there playing in the streets with his girl, Miss Ann. He never answered her calls. He never returned her calls. He just was living his life. And Ash had actually suggested to Joan that they hired a private investigator, but Joan said no. I'm assuming she must have thought there was some type of invasion of privacy. I'm like, girl, he out here cheating. At that point, call the people, because I need to see what you're doing and where you're at. So I'm with Ash. I'd have been on that. But whatever. So 2 weeks went by. 2 weeks. Mind you, Joan is at the house with their child, their son, and it took this man 2 weeks to finally get in contact and speak with his wife. John actually asked to come to the house to speak to Joan. And then at that point, he actually did come clean about having an affair, but obviously he had to throw more into it. He said that he was having an affair, he admitted to it and all of that. I don't think he really gave any specific details as far as who it was with, but he also said that he was being blackmailed because of said affair. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know, but that's what John has said, so, you know, who am I to say otherwise? Like, do people really blackmail over stuff like that? I mean, I don't know. But after this conversation, obviously, you know, us being women, we do what we do best. And Joan shortly found all the tea about his little affair. John actually had been staying at Ann's house this whole time. I don't know where Joan thought he was staying, but he actually was staying at Ann's house. But he also was renting him a small little apartment. So I'm guessing he had the apartment, was telling Joan that, hey, babe, I'm over here at this apartment, or, well, I guess they weren't talking, but either way, he had that apartment, but he was really staying with his mistress, so he was paying rent for somewhere he wasn't really staying. But you know, they do it all the time, child. In 1968, in November, the couple had now been separated for about 3 months, and they was living separately. Now, at this point, John, I guess he was done. He had some divorce papers drawn up, and then at that point, here come Ash. He said, nah, not my daughter, which I get. Like, Ash is a bit much, but I can definitely understand his reactions to a lot of things. Now, I don't know why, but let me not be one to judge, because I have definitely done crazy things myself. But Joan, obviously, she wanted to make her marriage work. She told her dad that she wasn't done. She wanted to make her marriage work. She wanted her family, and she still loved John. So at that point, Ash was like, all right, say less. I got it. He didn't really tell her that, but in his mind, that's what he said. So again, Ash being the type of man that he was, he wanted to let everybody do his daughter like that. So he called John up and said, bling, bling, say, come over to the house. I need to speak with you. And what did John do? He came. Now, Ash had actually, and this is funny, because Ash had actually presented John with a contract, and basically the contract stated, I'm putting a lot. The contract basically stated, you're going to return home to your wife and your son, and you're going to make the marriage work, or I'm coming after you for all the money that you still owe me. So I guess he still owed him some money, which makes sense because he spent all that money on that house. How did you pay? You owe money. Now, what's funny is that there was reports that this wasn't even a legal document. Ash just went to his house and typed that thing right on up. There was a lot of misspelling and typo and all that. And John, being a doctor, why he know? So he signed it and he packed his things and he took his hotel right on back to the house with his wife. Obviously, when you go home to your wife, one is to assume that you're cutting ties with your mistress. And John made it seem that's what it was, but we all know that's not what happened. And she was actually said to be very, when it comes to the men, she was very conniving and very just, she knew what to do, and basically would tell John, either you need to leave your wife for good or I'm done. I'm going and dating other men. I got men that's over here proposing to me. I'm gonna do my thing. You need to make your choice. But wasn't nobody trying to be with Anne. She was a beautiful woman, but she was about her man, which was Joan's man, but she wasn't even dating. But apparently that would get John to come back every time whenever she would give out these little threats. So he was never just truly done with the girl. So they still have their situation going on the side, while Joan is over here thinking that they're doing better. Sadly, they wasn't. Can't say what I want to say, but you know. So on March 14th, at this point, they were back together, and the couple actually had attended the annual Wild Game dinner where John played. He played a concert in his band because, again, very musically talented. So he played and performed with his band. They had them a good little night, but John stated that he wanted to go home early. So at that point, once he was going home early, Joan said, all right then, babe, I'll come with you. You know, I mean, I guess if that's your ride, you gotta go. Back then they didn't have Uber, so it makes sense. So on their way home, Joan asked the question. On the way home, Joan asked the question, no, pause. So on the way home, John was telling Joan that he had to do some business. I don't know what he had to do at night. Well, I know, but I don't know. And Joan asked, are you gonna be staying out all night? And John said that he probably would. I mean, at least he was truthful in that sense. He said he probably would. I mean, you and I probably would have been looking crazy because I would have had a whole lot of attitude. And then Joan simply said, okay, but you've been going out all night, all week. What is it that you need to be doing out all night? You need to be home and don't be out there all doggone night. I get you. So at this point, it obviously turned into a full-blown argument. And Joan basically gave him the ultimatum of, if you stay out all night, just don't come back to this house. Don't even bother coming back. And John, trifling behind, he dropped Joan off at the curb, and that boy skeeted on off. He peeled about that parking lot to run to his little mistress or whatever else he was doing. But I feel like it was the mistress. And it's not funny, but it's funny. So when he did that, obviously Joan was pissed. She yelling at him, you've blown it, you've lost your family, you lost your wife and your precious music room. Because at the end of the day, it's probably what all y'all care about is that doggone music room. And she said she was done with the boy. How true that was, we don't know. Now, the day after this big old fight, Joan actually found out that John was maintaining his apartment still. So what happened was John had came to get his son to do a haircut, and I guess during the trip he needed to get something, and they went back to the apartment. And I don't know if he just thought that his son was a rioter and wasn't gonna say nothing to his mom. I don't know what he thought, but obviously he went right back. As soon as he got back to that house, he told his mama, "Say, mama, daddy still got that apartment." And Joan, you know, she found out that he was still, you know, having his affair with Ann. And just at that point, she was obviously hurt. Now, at this time as well, while all of this is actually going on, Joan and John actually had two friends staying with them. They were actually visiting from Texas. Oh, well, not from Texas. They was actually visiting from Dallas. The women's names were actually Diane State. Again, I'm bad at names. It was Diane Staggis and Eunice Woolen. Joan had invited, actually also had invited her neighbor to come over. And then when she came over, they actually started playing an impromptu game of bridge. And she wanted to really discuss, you know, basically what was going on in her marriage, basically, you know, just talk to her girlfriend about it. But when she came over, like I stated, she decided to, you know, have an impromptu game of bridge where they all play. So, I don't know if this was shade or this is where they normally play their game, but they actually ended up playing the game in John's music room. And I guess at the time when the game started, John was not there, but eventually he brought that tail right onto the house, and then he noticed that they was in his music room. I'm assuming he probably wasn't happy, plus they was beefing, but it's like, didn't I just put you out and told you that you lost his music room when you left me here to go be with your mistress? You know, it's just me. So at this point, John was actually playing in the music room while they was playing their game. He was playing in the music room at one end, and they was playing the game at, you know, the other end of the music room. So Joan, being the daughter of Ash, you know how us women can be, she was loud talking her husband. She would talk about how, you know, just basically what was going on and how she was just done with John and she's done had enough. And anytime John would get close to her or come over, like, what you have said, Joan would just sit there. She'd get quiet on him. But at this point, obviously, you got company and you doing all that. I can see that'd be a bit much now. She was just basically saying how on Monday, she was going down to the lawyer's office and she was going to get divorced, take him off of her will and just be done with them. But the neighbor friend, what's her name? Maxwell, she was just very uncomfortable by this. She told Joan for her to stop doing that, you know, to stop loud talking, because if she kept doing that, she was going home. So Joan said, all right, then cool, fine, whatever, I'm gonna stop. And instead, them girls started passing notes. And the notes basically said the exact same thing, that she was done, you know, she was taking him off her will on Monday, and she planned to speak with the lawyer about a divorce, basically. Now, at this point, you know, it had been a long night, tensions had been high, and I'm assuming her neighbor friend had went home. John had put on a soft flow record, supposed to be a little romantic record. I don't know what his intentions was behind that, because you got a whole double life out here. But whatever, he put on the little record, and he came and he stood behind Joan. I bet Joan was just looking at him like, but nonetheless, her friends that were staying there, they was like, girl, dance with your man. Just go ahead and, you know, dance with him, you know, go ahead. So Joan, she obliged, and Joan and John, they had a nice little dance, and then shortly, they went to bed afterwards. Now, obviously we wasn't there, and we don't know what happened between the walls of them homes. What Mr. Big said, what the hell is going on? Oh, I guess he said between the sheets. I don't know what he said. Whatever. We don't know what happened. But the next morning, Miss Joanne was singing another song. She had another tune to go off of. She had a new pep in her step, one would say. So, you do with that what you may. She said that John had actually made her very happy in saying that he told me things I've never heard from this man. He told me things I've never heard from this man before in our whole married life. I think it's gonna be all right between us from now on. So, I guess that kind of gives you a little preview of what did happen. I'm just throw that in there. At this point, it's butter. The cholesterol is shot. Is that cholesterol, blood pressure, or all the above? Who knows? Now, the two friends actually would become key components of this whole case. When the couple had initially separated, Joan did state to her friends how John didn't care anything about their room. And they would also testify to the fact of how John, when he first moved back home, he would bring them little gifts. When I say gifts, I mean treats. But the treats will always follow after he would get some type of cage, and he would be gone for a few hours, and then he would come back with treats, pastry treats. And he was very I can't say this word, specific as far as who had what. So he would tell each of the ladies, this one is yours. I chose the flavor that I felt like that you would like the best. And they noted on several occasions, Joan would ask John, hey honey, I don't really want this flavor. Can you switch with mine? Or can I switch with someone else? And he would tell her no, which is very weird. He would say things like, you know, none of the flavor that you have, none of the other ladies will like it, or, you know, I picked this one out especially for you. And I'm assuming she didn't want to step on any toes or cause any ruckus, so she just ate it. But that actually happened on a few occasions, and they would attest to that later. So keep that on your noggin. So she actually spent most of the next day in bed, March the 16th. But she spent most of the day in bed actually being sick, vomiting just everywhere. It was just a hot mess inside of that room. And after checking on her several times, John had actually told the two friends that he was going to purchase medication in order to just make sure she's okay, to nurse her back to health. Now keep in mind, this is a whole board certified surgeon, and word on the street is he was a nah, I don't want to say good one, but he's one. We already know he wasn't done, so it is what it is. So now Joan was actually still sick and vomiting several more times. It just kept going. And then on Monday, March 17th, her friends, they were actually headed back to Dallas, because, you know, at this point they were only visiting Dallas, from Dallas. So they were heading back. So they were going to say their farewells, goodbyes to Joan. And they were very concerned about her. They were just like, dang girl, the hell happened to you? What happened to you? Which obviously, if you see your friend just looking like death herself, you're gonna be concerned. At least a good friend would be. Now on Tuesday, March 18th, Effie actually went to check on Joan, and she was in shock. And mind you, again, John is gone. Now whether he was at work honestly this time, or out with his band, or out with his girl out in them streets, don't know. But he was gone. But Effie actually went to go check on Joan, and she was just shocked. She actually found Joan in a soiled nightgown. It was a mess. When she moved Joan to kind of like move her out of the way, because she wanted to obviously clean her up, because who wants to see a grown woman like that? That's, you know, it's kind of sad. When she moved Joan in order to clean her up, she actually found dried feces just on the bed, attached to Joan's skin, just clearly just indicating that John, what was you up in here doing? You was just letting your wife just sit in this? But John had placed 2 towels underneath Joan, so I guess, thank you? I don't know. But he actually had placed 2 towels underneath her, I guess, to catch any of the, you know, fecal matter, feces, you know, urination, body sweats, or whatever else was unfortunately coming out of poor Joan at this time. Now, on these on these 2 towels that have been placed underneath her, Miss Effie could tell, well, Miss Green, well, Miss Effie, whatever, could tell that Joan had recently had a unfortunate bowel accident, you know, diarrhea to whatever you want to call it, and she could tell that there actually had been blood in it. So at this point, she's sitting in it and there's blood. And so at that point, Miss Green, she wanted to obviously, you know, get Joan cleaned up, you know, just to take care of her, to get her cleaned up so she's not sitting in her own waste. This is the most hard part about making the macaroni and cheese, unless you're trying to just use regular cheese, which, you know, to each their own. So when Miss Green started to move Joan to the bathroom in order to clean her up, she noticed that Joan started going blue in the face, to the point to where you can obviously tell that she was in distress. She just wasn't doing well. She was on the downswing and not the upswing. That orange juice was not working. So Effie, you know, did as best as she could. She wanted to hurry up and get Joan back in the bed so her body could relax, and just so she didn't feel like she was causing any more problems than, you know, what my girl was already clearly experiencing. So at this point, Miss Green actually called John just to kind of let him know, like, hey, you know, Miss Hill is not doing well at all. But of course, John did not answer the phone. So at this point, Effie called on her husband, who actually also happened to work for the Hills. She called him and told him, hey, call up the Robinsons, let them know what's going on with their daughter and that they need to come check on her immediately. But I guess at the time, the Robinsons weren't home, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that they had voicemail back then. I don't know if they had voicemail or maybe they just called back another time. But at the time when they first called, they weren't home, and they actually came later on to kind of like see what was going on with their daughter and just to kind of check, you know, the health of her. Now, mind you, this is the morning of March 19th when Joan's mom actually came to see, you know, her daughter and see exactly what was going on. And when when Joan's mother actually came into the room, she found Joan laying in her own body waste. So that's at this point at least 2 times that people have found Joan just laying in her own bodily waste and fluids and just Lord knows what else. And what made it even worse is that John was in the room. He was standing at the foot of her bed, looking at his wife being just saturated in her waist. That's ridiculous. That just kind of lets you know his feelings towards his wife in the whole situation at that point. Not only was Joan, you know, in her own, you know, bodily fluids, she also had vomit on her face, just coming down her face, just clearly just poorly taken care of and just neglected. And mind you, again, the husband is sitting right there. And then when her mom found out that her daughter had a fever as well on top of all of that, she said, okay. At that point, John said, well, I think I should take her to the hospital. Which is funny because it's like now that the parents were there, all of a sudden you want to make a move. So at this point, you know, Ash brings the pickup truck around and he finally sees his daughter, and his reaction was, dear Lord, what happened to this child? Which I would say the same thing. And he asked, you know, did you want me to go with you? And she said, no, Daddy, I'll be okay. And just, you know, reassure her that she'd be okay and that he didn't need to go because, you know, her husband and her mom was going. So Ash, decided not to go. He would, let them handle it. And, they were off to the hospital. Now, mind you, John did not call for an ambulance. He decided in turn that he was going to drive the vehicle itself. Don't know why. Don't know what his mindset was, but obviously, you come to your own conclusion about that, I guess. Now, at this point, Joan was actually only semi-conscious. Now, John being a doctor himself, one would think that he would go to the nearest hospital, the best hospital, to get his wife the best care that he possibly can, but no. My boy took her to a new small town hospital called Sharpton's General Hospital. And on top of that, the hospital was 11 miles from their home. So instead of choosing a hospital that had better equipment and resources, he chose to go further out with a more smaller hospital. He's given a lot of red flags. Now, as he was driving, John was actually driving very slow. His mother-in-law actually compared him to a snail, stating that he was driving so slow, she didn't even think that maybe he even wanted to get there. That's how slow he was literally driving. And the actual drive took them 45 minutes to get to that hospital. And it was said that John was super calm during the whole drive, which, well, you could say because maybe he's a doctor, he's used to these types of things, but I would just figure since it's your wife, you'd be a little bit more in a rush, put the pedal to the metal and let's get there. And he actually also, during the ride, while his wife was in the back, half conscious, turned on a symphony orchestra and was playing that in the car, just loud as who knows what. To the point to where Miss Robinson actually yelled at him. She actually yelled at him and said, "Turn that damn music down, John. I can't hear myself think." Which at that point lets you know that music was ridiculously loud. And it's just, he had no get up and go for his wife at that point. Now also during the drive, Joan had actually told her mother, "I'm going blind, I cannot see." And then Miss Robinson was like, "John, did you hear that? Did you hear what he said?" This boy looked back and said, "Oh, that's just blackouts. That's all that is. She's just having a few little blackouts." Baby, blackout or no blackout, going blind, that's still an issue. But he just shrugged it off like it was really nothing. Now again, the hospital that he chose was a smaller hospital. It had no emergency room nor an intensive care unit. Again, John is a whole doctor out here. He would know these things, but that's the one he still chose to take his wife to. And John insisted that the hospital had been alerted and been told of their arrival, and that the emergency team, that how can they have emergency teams in the emergency room, but a team of doctors would be waiting upon their arrival to receive Joan, and that they're going to give her top-notch treatment, and she was going to be just fine. However, once they got there, Miss Robinson said, "Wasn't nobody out there. There was no one waiting for them. There was no sense of urgency. There was nothing. They just pulled up to the front of the hospital, and John got his tail out of the car and just politely walked over to the counter and started speaking to people." Miss Robinson actually said that it seemed as if they weren't even aware that Joan was even coming or what was going on with Joan. Now, his mother-in-law actually stayed in the car with her daughter and just kind of sat and watched John for a few minutes, just looking like, I'm probably thinking she was looking like, this fool was just up in here lying. Wasn't nobody waiting on my daughter. Like, I wonder at that point, she started to kind of question, because I'd have been had some questions at that point. But they have been, my children. Just not sitting well with me. Whew. Put this right here so I can remember which cheese that was, to be honest. Now, you just want to keep up with the timeline of events. Mind you, Joan first started getting sick on March 16th, and then her husband finally decided to take her to the hospital on March 19th. So you just want to keep that right here in the old noggin. So after waiting a few minutes, finally a lonesome single little nurse came out there, taking her little old time, and with a wheelchair, and was finally able to get Joan into the hospital. And they actually admitted her into a private room to where she was supposed to, you know, receive treatment at that point. Now, when they checked it, her blood pressure was actually 60/40. I don't know about blood pressures. Apparently, that's not good. So, obviously. So, it was actually, so I guess that's considered low. No, it apparently was so high, either low or high, whatever it was. It was so bad that they actually checked it again because they actually thought that maybe the equipment was malfunctioning. But after they checked it again, it was like, no, it ain't us, it's her. Like, she's really that bad. So immediately, the nurse at that point called the doctor. So the nurse called the doctor because she believed that Joan was in shock. So she called Dr. Walter Bertinat. Now, Dr. Bertinat was actually hand-selected and chosen, trying to find my stuff, was actually hand-selected and chosen by John himself to treat his wife. Now, many have definitely questioned this because not necessarily that there was anything wrong with the doctor, but he definitely wasn't, you know, world renowned or even Texas renowned at that point. And he had actually never treated Joan on any other occasion. He actually only had known them socially. And I think there was only like maybe 1 or 2 times that he had actually seen Joan socially. So it wasn't even like they were just friends or knew each other well. It was just, why did you choose me? Because as a doctor himself, John had the access and knowledge to choose any surgeon to, you know, treat his wife, you know, to help her. But of all the people, he chose Dr. Bertinat, which I can see where, you know, the confusion with, you know, that would be like, John simply kind of brushed it off and said something to the effect of Joan had remembered the doctor previously and how kind he was, and she made a comment about him having a kind smile. Basically something stupid, but you know, whatever. So that was apparently his reasoning as to why he chose that doctor over other doctors. And he also stated that Joan wasn't just really kind or nice or good with doctors, which was actually very, you know, contradictory statement to, you know, her personality and what most people knew of her. But again, he didn't really know Joan enough to say if that were true or not true. Now, John had actually described his wife's symptoms as just basic vomiting and nausea. The doctor didn't realize the severity of her symptoms until he actually was there just with her. And then at that point, he kind of realized, oh wow, this is definitely way more serious than what he let on. So he initially thought it was the flu. So he had ordered IV fluid just, you know, to replenish her, you know, to get her going. But now he's actually starting to think that maybe it was some type of foodborne poison, well, illness. Which, understandably so, you know, just due to her symptoms, it would make sense, right? Right. But to be honest, he was really unsure. And you know what? Unlike some before him, I appreciate that he was able to say, look, I don't know what's going on with her. he actually called in a colleague, a fellow doctor named Dr. Frank Lanza. And at this point, Dr. Lanza actually thought that Joan may have been in septic shock. So at that point, he did order blood work, but the blood work would take at least 72 hours to come back, which, you know, doesn't seem like a lot, but in Joan's condition, you know, every second counts, you know, every second is, you know, vital, every day is vital. So at this point, Joan had been a patient at the hospital for about 6 hours. I always miscalculate when it comes to the flour, and I put it in here because I don't have any cute containers yet, and it'd be getting everywhere, so I just put it in a bag at that point. And then at this point, after being at the hospital for about 6 hours, her kidneys actually started to fail. And at that point, you know, once the kidneys start to fail, you know that you're in trouble. If something needs to, you know, they need to figure something out and figure it out pretty quick, you know, at that. Had edema, so at this point she wasn't passing any urine, so they kept just pumping her with fluids, just trying to prompt her urine, not her urine, trying to prompt her kidneys, just trying to get them going. It's like, hey, you know, what are you doing in there? We need you to get the going. But unfortunately, that did not help. By 8 p.m., Joan's kidneys had unfortunately failed to respond, and her condition was considered grave at this point. At this point, it was like, we need to do something. Like, she's not doing well. Like, they knew it wasn't good. Now, Dr. Bernard Hicks, he was a kidney specialist. He was actually called in to help with Joan and just consult on the case to kind of see, you know, what was going on. And he did determine that she was in severe kidney failure. Since the hospital was not a top hospital, they didn't have what they needed in order to start dialysis for Joan. Now, they did debate on whether to transfer her to another hospital, but unfortunately it was determined that her condition was way too severe, too grave to even move her. It just wasn't safe to be moved. So they had to go with the next best option, unfortunately, in this scenario. So since there was no dialysis machine at this small hospital, they had to go with the next best option, which I know I'm gonna mess this name up, but they had to start and do a peritoneal dialysis. Google it. I Googled it to explain to you all. Again, she didn't go to medical school, so you know. Ooh, milk is kind of heavy. But either way, so they needed to start this procedure on Joan immediately, like literally immediately. So they obviously needed John's consent, since this, you know, after all, was his wife. You know, he's the you know, next of kin. You know, he needs to sign for her. One would think that you would just probably go out to the waiting room or turn to the side, or turn to the side to ask for permission. But John was there. John was gone. They was gone. And they couldn't start without getting his consent. They actually called John at 9 p.m. He actually did not arrive to the hospital to give his consent until 11 p.m. That's just sad. It really is. So it was obvious to a lot of people there that John just really didn't seem to care very much. Like, he just was very unbothered, some would say. To the point of he was starting to look a little suspicious. He just wasn't interested at all, really, in the whole recovery stages at all. Joan would be in her room, and John would just be gone. Be sleeping in another room while Joan was, you know, in her room, and they would obviously offer him, you know, somewhere to stay and sleep. You know, it was that was no issue. He could obviously stay there. So at 12:30 a.m., Dr. Bertinat had actually checked on Joan. Now, while she had necessarily improved, she had stabilized. So that was obviously, you know, a good sign, you know. No, we're not out of the woods yet, but at least you're not getting worse, you know. So that was good. Her blood pressure had elevated and she was, you know, responding to dialysis, which was good. So Dr. Bertinat felt as if it was safe, it was okay for him to, you know, leave, to just get a little bit of rest, you know, shut his eyes. But Dr. Lanz, on the other hand, he said that he would stay a little bit longer and he would call if anything changed. If anything was to happen, he was definitely going to call and let him know, which is, again, good. Now, John also felt like he could get some sleep at this point, so he actually went into an on-call room, I believe, to get some rest. Joan had asked him to stay with her again, and for whatever reason, he declined again. And he went to go sleep in a separate room. Now, whenever John had left, Joan told the nurse, "You take care of him." And it just shows that to the end, Joan had not lost faith. She was still loving her husband, and it's just very unfortunate, you know, that, you know, what happened to her actually happened to her. At 1:30 a.m., all the doctors basically felt comfortable enough that they could, you know, go home, get some rest. You know, Joan was doing okay. They felt confident enough in that, you know, assessment. But sadly, at 2:30 a.m. on March 19th, the attending nurse noticed that Joan's vitals indicated, you know, that suddenly she had heart failure. The team rushed in with heart failure equipment to, you know, come to her aid and just to try to help her. As they did this, Joan softly and sadly lifted her head and gasped her husband's name as blood came falling out of her mouth. And unfortunately, that was the last words that she spoke, and Joan Hill did pass away that night. Now, at the time, Texas law required that any patient that died within 24 hours of being admitted to a hospital, an autopsy was required. There was no ifs, ands, buts about it. An autopsy had to be done. It was, you know, legally. Now, Dr. Bertinat actually talked to John and told him the legal and medical reason for the necessity in regards to the actual autopsy and why it had to be performed, and just, you know, the legal need behind it. Well, I think, again, John being a doctor, he would know these things, he would understand these things, and it would be no issue. Oh, Johnny boy had us fooled again. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Again, the doctor spoke with John and let him know that it was required. However, John actually instructed a worker to call the local funeral home in order for them to go ahead and pick up Joan's body. Within 1 hour of arriving at the funeral home, they actually started to embalm Joan. Now that obviously is, again, a big no-no. That was not supposed to be done, but he instructed them, they did it. Why they did it, I don't know if they weren't aware of the situation or what, but now the hospital's pathologist, he actually arrived to the hospital. He actually arrived to the funeral home at 10 a.m. to carry out the autopsy, just thinking and assuming, only to find out that the embalming had already been completed. It had already been done. There was no going back. And if you don't know, when you embalm someone, that blood is up out of them, so that can, you know, disrupt a lot of what they're trying to look for in an autopsy. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the oven now. Now the pathologist actually finished the autopsy at 11:30 a.m. without, finding any cause of death besides, discoloration of her pancreas. It suggested that she may have died from pancreatitis, but again, the embalming had already taken place, so, Now, unbeknownst to John, Ash was, in the background, just speaking to other highly trained doctors and professionals, just getting them a second opinion after he heard of the first diagnosis of the reason why his daughter died. And everyone basically said that's highly unlikely, it didn't make sense, and just something wasn't adding up. Now, the day before the funeral, Joan's friends, the ones that were staying in town, they actually came back in from Dallas, to pay their respects and go to the funeral, obviously. Now, Stagas, I'm gonna get better with these names, I promise. But she actually went by the hill home to pay her respects and, to see John, just to see how he was doing, just trying to be a good friend to Joan and check on Joan's husband, because she didn't know how much he meant to her. And then when she got there, she was just in shock on what she found. Actually surprised to find that he was actually upstairs with some friends, and he was just laughing, having a good time, watching a movie in his music room, just living it up. Just, in her opinion, not looking much like a widowed husband that's in grief because his wife just died. He was just living his best life. And she just turned and was just like, ugh, and just leaving in disgust, which we all would. And as she was leaving, I guess that's when John at that point noticed that she was there, and he actually went to stop her, to speak with her, to stop her. She was just saying how she was just so surprised that she had passed so quickly, and how she had just seen her friend, and she was just wondering, like, John, why did you not get her any help any sooner? And this is where my boy messed up. Well, he been messed up. But he told her friend, this is not someone that doesn't know her, but her actual friend, his response was, you know what she was like about hospitals and how she was. And this actually made her very suspicious, because it was, again, very contradictory of what she knew of her friend and what a lot of people knew of Joan. Joan was not this type of person that he was trying to paint her out to be. And she knew that. So she was definitely very suspicious of John, giving him that little side eye. She at that point immediately went to the Robertson house and basically just told Ash her suspicions and just her interaction, like what she thought and how she, was viewing John and what he was saying, how he did, just everything. And Ash was just over there just sipping it up like tea, just waiting, because he already didn't like him. Let's just be real. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven so my son could quit harassing me about when we're going to eat. So at that point, she's over there just spilling all the tea, and Ash is just taking it all in. So really, I guess that was just really the straw that broke the camel's back. That's all that Ash needed to hear. Just his initial, disdain for John, plus, him speaking with all of his doctor friends or people he hired, whoever, and them just giving him the information that this seems very highly unlikely that your daughter would have died, from this way. That was enough to convince John that, that was enough to convince Ash that something else was, going on. So on the morning of March 21st, the morning of his daughter's funeral, Ash Robertson marched right down to the Attorney General's or district's office and demanded that John be arrested due to the fact that he killed his wife. And that is where I'm going to leave you for part one. Please be sure to come and check me out for part 2, where I'll be cooking a whole new meal and just getting into the rest of this very interesting story. And if you think that you heard a lot right now, just wait till part 2. It definitely gets even more crazy, just more drama, more scandal, more surprises. It's just, so definitely make sure that you tune back in so you can make sure you catch the tail end of Mr. John and all of his shenanigans. And I definitely would appreciate you if you would like, subscribe, and share my page. Or at this point, you can even like, subscribe, or share. Do what you do. And definitely just share it on social media, tell everyone about it, and just make sure you tune in and come back for more interesting stories here on Murder Meals. Thank you.
What's your YouTube channel called?